The crystal chandeliers cast golden light across marble floors as the city's most powerful dynasty gathered for their annual family banquet. Tonight, the Blackstone estate would host senators, oil barons, and tech moguls, a display of wealth so extravagant it could fund small nations. But among the sea of designer gowns and custom suits, one man walked to the grand entrance with quiet confidence, his presence unnoticed by the glittering crowd. Marcus Chin stepped into the opulent foyer, his tailored black suit elegant yet understated. No gold watches, no flashy jewelry, just a kind of refined simplicity that spoke of true sophistication. But to the Blackstone family gathering near the entrance, he looked like nothing more than another social climber hoping to impress. Well, laughed Victoria Blackstone, the family matriarch, her diamond necklace catching the light as she gestured dismissively. Look what the wind blew in. Did someone forget to check the guest list? Her children erupted in laughter, their champagne glasses raised in mock celebration of their own wit. Marcus offered a polite nod, his dark eyes betraying nothing as the laughter grew louder. The youngest Blackstone son, Derek, stepped forward with a smirk that had humiliated countless business rivals. I'm sorry, but I think there's been a mistake. This is a private family event. The service entrance is around back. The crowd of guests began to take notice, their conversations dying as they sensed drama brewing. Marcus remained perfectly still, his hands clasped behind his back, watching the performance with the patience of a man who had seen this show before. Oh my God, gasped Sarah Blackstone, the daughter whose social media influence had toppled politicians. He actually thinks he belongs here. This is precious. She pulled out her phone, ready to document what she assumed would be an embarrassing retreat. But Marcus didn't retreat. Instead, he smiled, a small, knowing expression that seemed to contain secrets. I believe my invitation was quite specific, he said softly, his voice carrying despite its gentle tone. Though I understand the confusion. The mockery that followed would echo through the halls of power for years to come. But in that moment, it was just the beginning of the most expensive mistake the Blackstone family would ever make. Inside the grand ballroom, the humiliation intensified like a carefully orchestrated symphony of cruelty. The Blackstones had turned Marcus into their evening's entertainment, and their guests, uncomfortable but unwilling to challenge their hosts, watched the spectacle unfold. Ladies and gentlemen, announced Victoria Blackstone, tapping her champagne flute with a silver spoon, we seem to have a charity case among us tonight. Someone who clearly didn't understand that wealth isn't just about wearing a decent suit to the right party. The comment drew nervous chuckles from oil executives and tech moguls who knew better than to cross the Blackstone dynasty. Marcus stood near the grand piano, his posture unchanged, accepting each bar with the composure of a man listening to a weather report. I heard his little company is struggling, Derek whispered loudly enough for the room to hear. Probably came here hoping to network his way up from the bottom. You know how these desperate entrepreneurs get. They'll crash any party if they think it'll save their sinking ship. Senator Williams, a longtime family friend, joined the chorus. It takes real audacity to show up uninvited to a gathering like this. I respect the hustle, but there are proper channels, son. Marcus turned slightly, acknowledging the senator with a nod. Sometimes the most important business happens in unexpected places, he replied, his voice carrying a weight that made a few guests pause their laughter. Sarah Blackstone wasn't finished. She approached with the confidence of someone who had never been told no, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor. Look, I admire your persistence, really. But this isn't some networking event downtown. These are people who move billions with a phone call. What could you possibly offer that would interest anyone here? The question hung in the air like smoke, and for a moment, the room felt genuinely quiet. Marcus looked around at the faces staring at him. Some amused, others pitying, a few beginning to show the first flickers of curiosity about why this man remained so calm under such intense ridicule. Sometimes, Marcus said, his words measured and deliberate, the most powerful moves are made by those others underestimate. He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the room. But I suppose we'll find out soon enough. The cryptic response sent ripples through the crowd, leaving guests glancing at each other with questions they couldn't quite articulate. Who was this man who stood so still while storms raged around him? As the evening progressed, whispers began to weave through the crowd like an underground current. Near the Caviar Station, tech billionaire James Morrison leaned toward his wife. There's something about that guy, the way he carries himself. It's not desperation. It's confidence. Don't be ridiculous, she whispered back, glancing toward Marcus, who was calmly observing a Monet painting as if he were alone in a museum. If he had real money, the Blackstones would know about it. They know everyone who matters. But doubt was spreading like cracks in ice. Oil magnate Robert Kane found himself studying Marcus from across the room. 23 years in business, he murmured to his companion, and I've learned to read men. That's not how desperation looks. The Blackstone family, however, remained oblivious to the shifting undercurrents. They had mistaken silence for weakness, composure for defeat. Victoria Blackstone raised her glass again, this time for what she intended to be the final blow. I think it's time we address the elephant in the room, she announced, her voice carrying across the ballroom. We have someone here tonight who clearly doesn't understand boundaries. Someone who thinks that showing up uninvited to a family gathering makes them part of our world. Derek stepped forward, emboldened by his mother's lead. Maybe we should call security. I mean, how do we even know he's legitimate? For all we know, he could be some kind of corporate spy, or maybe, interrupted Sarah, her eyes gleaming with malicious inspiration. He's one of those social media influencers trying to create content. You know, crashing a billionaire's party. That would get millions of views. The suggestion drew genuine laughter from the crowd, the kind that comes from relief at having an explanation for something that didn't quite make sense. But Marcus remained unmoved, his dark eyes reflecting nothing but patient observation. The truth, he said quietly, his words somehow carrying to every corner of the room, has a way of revealing itself when the time is right. Tonight might be more educational than anyone expects. A few guests exchanged glances. Investment banker Linda Torres felt a chill she couldn't explain. There's something we're missing here, she whispered to her husband. Men like that don't just show up places. They get invited or they own the place. But her words were lost in the growing momentum of mockery, as the Blackstone family prepared to deliver what they believed would be their crushing finale. The moment arrived with the weight of inevitability. Victoria Blackstone stood at the center of her glittering empire, surrounded by the most powerful people in the city, ready to deliver what she assumed would be the final humiliation. Her champagne glass caught the light as she prepared her toast, unaware that she was about to trigger the most expensive mistake in her family's history. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice ringing with aristocratic authority. Tonight we celebrate more than just family. We celebrate the difference between those who earn their place at tables like this and those who dream of billions but will never understand what real power looks like. The crowd grew uncomfortable, sensing the cruelty in her words, but none dared interrupt the matriarch of one of the city's most influential families. She turned toward Marcus, her smile sharp as a blade. We've all worked too hard to build what we have to let wannabe businessmen crash our private moments, hoping to network their way into relevance. Some people simply need to learn where they belong. Derek joined his mother, his confidence boosted by the crowd's attention. It's actually sad, isn't it? The desperation of someone who thinks wearing the right suit grants access to our world. Maybe you should start smaller. Perhaps a community college business seminar would be more your speed. Sarah pulled out her phone again, ready to capture what she expected would be Marcus's embarrassed exit. This is going to make amazing content. Reality check, when dreamers meet real money. But Marcus didn't flinch. Instead, he set down his untouched champagne glass and took a single step forward. The movement was so controlled, so deliberate, that the room fell silent as if a conductor had raised his baton. You know, Marcus said, his voice carrying a new quality. Not louder, but somehow more present. There's wisdom in the old saying that wealth moves silently until it speaks louder than laughter. He paused, his gaze moving slowly across the faces staring at him. Tonight, I think we're about to discover just how loud silence can be. The cryptic words hung in the air like a storm front, and for the first time that evening, the Blackstone family looked uncertain. Victoria's smile faltered slightly, while Derek's confident posture wavered as he tried to decode the meaning behind Marcus's calm defiance. In the back of the room, seasoned businessman Frank Rodriguez felt his phone buzz in his pocket. As CEO of Rodriguez Holdings, he'd learned to never ignore after-hours notifications, especially during social events where deals were often born. But what he saw on his screen made him freeze in place. Breaking. Chun Dynamics executes historic $8.2 billion acquisition, absorbs Blackstone financial empire. His face went pale as he read the details. The notification continued. Marcus Chun, CEO of Chun Dynamics, completes hostile takeover of Blackstone Holdings subsidiaries in coordinated moves spanning 3 time zones. Rodriguez looked up sharply, his eyes finding Marcus across the room. Marcus, who was still standing calmly amid the mockery, his expression unchanged even as his company was simultaneously dismantling the financial foundation of everyone who had spent the evening laughing at him. The truth was spreading to the connected world at the speed of fiber optic cables, racing toward the ballroom where the most powerful people in the city remained blissfully unaware that their world was changing in real time. Within minutes, the laughter that filled the air would turn to stunned silence, and the man they had dismissed as a nobody would reveal himself to be the architect of the most devastating corporate restructuring in the city's history. But for now, Marcus simply smiled that same knowing smile and waited for the digital age to deliver justice at the speed of light. The first phone buzzed like a harbinger of apocalypse. Then another. Within seconds, the ballroom filled with the sound of notification chimes, creating a digital symphony of incoming catastrophe. Investment banker Linda Torres was among the first to understand. Her face drained of color as she read the breaking news alert. Chun Dynamics completes $8.2 billion acquisition of Blackstone financial empire in coordinated global strike. "Oh my God," she whispered, her champagne glass slipping from nerveless fingers to shatter on the marble floor. The sound cut to the growing murmur of concerned voices as more guests accessed the same devastating news. Senator Williams grabbed his phone with trembling hands. "This can't be right. Blackstone Holdings acquired? Their shipping division, tech subsidiaries, real estate portfolio, all of it." Frank Rodriguez found his voice first, his words carrying across the ballroom like a death knell. Marcus Chun, CEO of Chun Dynamics. Net worth, Jesus Christ, $12.4 billion. The silence that followed was deafening. Every eye in the room turned toward Marcus, who stood exactly where he had been moments before, his posture unchanged, his expression serene. But now he seemed different, not because he had moved, but because the world around him had shifted completely. Victoria Blackstone's phone buzzed insistently. Her hands shook as she answered. "What do you mean frozen? What do you mean all our accounts?" Her voice rose to a shriek. "That's impossible. We own half the city." Derek grabbed his mother's phone, his face cycling through disbelief, rage, and dawning terror as he absorbed the scope of the financial massacre. The shipping contracts gone. The tech patents transferred. The downtown properties, how did he even know about those? Marcus stepped forward, and the crowd parted like water before him. But this time, it wasn't from dismissal. It was from recognition of power so vast that it just reshaped the economic landscape of their entire city. "The Chun Dynamics acquisition strategy," Marcus said quietly, his voice now commanding absolute attention. "Focus on creating sustainable value while ensuring minimal disruption to employees and smaller stakeholders. We prioritize preserving jobs over preserving egos." Sarah Blackstone, her phone still recording, watched in horror as her own social media accounts exploded with notifications. The business world was celebrating the downfall of her family's arrogance, with clips of tonight's humiliation already going viral alongside news of the corporate takeover. "You..." Victoria's voice cracked as she struggled to process the magnitude of her mistake. "You let us... Why didn't you?" Marcus regarded her with something that might have been pity. Because sometimes the most valuable lessons come from discovering that respect cannot be purchased, borrowed, or inherited. It must be earned. Oil magnate Robert Kane, his own phone buzzing with calls from concerned investors, stepped forward with new respect. "Mr. Chun, I believe we owe you an apology that no words can adequately express." "The market will adjust," Marcus replied calmly. "It always does. The question now is whether we choose to learn from tonight or whether we repeat the patterns that brought us here. Around the room, faces that had shown contempt now displayed desperate calculation. Investment opportunities, partnership possibilities, and damage control strategies were being frantically reassessed as the full scope of Marcus Chen's power became clear. But it was too late for the Blackstone family. Their empire hadn't just been acquired. It had been redistributed, with employee ownership programs, community development funds, and sustainable business practices taking precedence over the aristocratic excess that had defined their legacy. The man they had called a nobody had just proven that in the modern world, true power moves silently, strikes precisely, and transforms everything it touches. The collapse was as swift as an avalanche and twice as devastating. Within hours, the Blackstone family watched their century-old empire disintegrate not with explosions, but with the quiet efficiency of digital transfers and legal documentation. Victoria Blackstone sat in stunned silence as her lawyers explained the scope of the disaster. The pension funds are protected, the employee contracts honored, but the family assets, Mrs. Blackstone, everything leveraged against the core holdings is gone. The estate, the jet, the yacht in Monaco, it's all collateral for debts that now exceed your liquid assets. Derek paced frantically in the estate's marble foyer, his phone pressed to his ear. What do you mean you can't extend the credit line? We've been banking with you for 40 years. The response on the other end made him sink into a chair that would soon belong to someone else. Sarah's social media empire crumbled as sponsors fled and brand partnerships evaporated. The woman who had built her influence on displaying wealth now faced the reality of having nothing left to display. Her final video, recorded in tears, would ironically become her most viewed content, a cautionary tale about hubris in the digital age. Meanwhile, across the city, Marcus Chen's acquisition had triggered something unprecedented. Former Blackstone employees received notifications of equity ownership in their newly restructured companies. The shipping division's dock workers discovered they now own profit-sharing stakes. The tech subsidiary's engineers found themselves partners rather than just employees. Mr. Chen's vision, explained Dr. Angela Martinez, the economist tasked with analyzing the restructuring, wasn't just acquisition, it was transformation. He didn't destroy wealth. He redistributed it to the people who actually created value. Back at the estate, the guests who had laughed at Marcus now faced their own reckonings. Senator Williams watched his phone ring incessantly as reporters demanded statements about his association with the disgraced family. Investment banker Linda Torres fielded panic calls from clients who had invested heavily in Blackstone holdings. But perhaps the most profound transformation occurred in the business community itself. Within 48 hours, executive seminars on respectful leadership were being organized. Corporate culture consultants found themselves booked solid. The story of Marcus Chen's patient dignity in the face of humiliation became a case study in business schools worldwide. Oil magnate Robert Kane summed up the sentiment that spread to the city's power corridors. We all learned something tonight. Money can buy a lot of things, but it can't buy the wisdom to recognize real power when it stands quietly in front of you. The Blackstone name, once synonymous with untouchable wealth, became a cautionary tale. Their former peers now whispered their story as a reminder that in the modern economy, arrogance was a luxury that even billionaires couldn't afford. Marcus Chen had proven that true power doesn't announce itself with golden chandeliers or designer labels. It moves in silence, strikes with precision, and leaves the world more just than it found it. As the dust settled on the most dramatic corporate restructuring in the city's history, Marcus Chen stood in his modest office overlooking the harbor where Blackstone ships once dominated the skyline. The vessels still moved cargo, but now they carried the dreams of workers who had become owners, employees who had become partners. The morning news cycles had moved on to other stories, but the lessons of that evening continued to ripple through boardrooms and business schools around the world. Marcus had received thousands of interview requests, speaking opportunities, and partnership proposals. He declined them all, choosing instead to focus on the quiet work of building rather than the loud work of explaining. True wealth, he told his assistant as she sorted through the stack of accolades and honors, isn't measured in the billions you can move, but in the lives you can improve while moving them. The Blackstone family had learned this lesson too late, but others were taking note. Across the city, Executives were reassessing how they treated service staff, vendors, and anyone they perceived as beneath their station. The phrase, "you never know who you're talking to," had taken on new weight in business circles. Dr. Martinez's economic analysis had been published to widespread acclaim. The Chun model demonstrates that sustainable capitalism requires not just the accumulation of wealth, but its thoughtful distribution among stakeholders who create value. This isn't charity, it's enlightened business strategy. But perhaps the most important transformation was cultural. The video of the Blackstone family's humiliation, contrasted with Marcus's dignified response, had been watched millions of times. Comment sections filled with stories from viewers who had faced similar dismissals, who had been underestimated, who had chosen patience over pride. "Where are you watching from?" Marcus had asked in his only public statement about the evening. Whatever your circumstances, remember that respect is earned through character, not inherited through bank accounts. The world has room for many kinds of success, but only one kind of dignity. Young entrepreneurs began emulating not just Marcus's business strategies, but his personal conduct. Business schools added modules on humility and respect to their leadership curricula. The phrase Marcus Chin moment entered the vocabulary, describing instances when quiet competence triumphed over loud arrogance. The man who had been mocked as a nobody had become something more valuable than wealthy. He had become a symbol of what power looked like when wielded with wisdom. His companies thrived not just because they were profitable, but because they were purposeful. And in boardrooms around the world, executives faced with difficult decisions began asking themselves a new question. What would Marcus Chin do? The answer, as that unforgettable evening had proven, was usually the right one. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been underestimated or seen others dismissed unfairly, share your thoughts in the comments below. Sometimes the most powerful victories are won not with anger, but with patience. Sometimes the greatest wealth isn't what you accumulate, but what you choose to do with it. Hit that like button if you believe respect should be based on character, not bank accounts. And subscribe for more stories about justice, dignity, and the power of quiet strength in a loud world. Remember, true power doesn't need to announce itself. It simply changes everything around it, one thoughtful decision at a time.